So thank you for doing this.
It's great to be here.
You got this job last summer. You had your 100-day plan all worked out. You knew what you were going to do. You were ready to go, and then something happened. Talk about that.
So I do want to let people know it was a really good 100-day plan, by the way. So at PwC, we have an election process, and we elect our senior partner. And you find out in April that I was successful, and I really did. I had this great plan, and the first one was to choose a leadership team. And one of the great privileges of being the leader of an organization is you get to pick your team. And I'm very proud that we have one of the most diverse teams of any, not only in the country, around the world, in terms of diverse teams and just makeup from all different angles and the like. And so the team and I had this great plan together. We took over on July 1st, and on that Friday morning of the first week, we woke up to read what happened in Dallas. And all of a sudden, everything changed. And what we started to do is we got on the phone as a team. We're spread out all across the country, and we started to talk about what do we do. And we knew that our people were hurting. And as people started to write to us and we reached out, one of our people summed it up best. They said, we are a leading organization. We're ranked across many different venues as a great place to work, and we're proud of where we are. But when people showed up to work that Friday morning, they said the silence was deafening. And so here we are, a very, very progressive organization, and yet our people are showing up saying, I don't know what to do. And the more we listened, the more we communicated in that first week, what we realized was as much as we had invested, we had still a long way to go. And one of the things that you no doubt you see in your organizations is how much risk do you take? And I am very much a risk taker, but I'm a big believer you listen to your people. And so our people over and over told us in that subsequent week, they told us we need to talk about this issue. And we made the decision that we were going to open up and talk about race front and center.
Before we go too far down that road, there had to be some people in the room who said, you don't want to go there.
Yeah, there was.
I mean, you know, that whole Howard Schultz and the baristas thing, you know, is that a path you want to follow?
Without a doubt. I mean, look, let's just be clear. When you sit around and get your leadership team together, you've got everything from your business unit leaders, your general counsel, your risk management folks. And there are a lot of people saying, too raw, too emotional, can go in the wrong different places. You don't know how other people feel. You're only getting one point of view. And we had all those points of view. And to be very frank, if we're not talking about those issues and acknowledging it, we're not having the whole conversation. We're having the politically correct conversation. So without a doubt, those were there.
And I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is one of those cases where you have to make the decision. It could have gone either way. You could have sided with the people who said don't do it, or you could have sided with the people who said
that. Alan, exactly right. There were both sides of the camp, and ultimately as a CEO, you've got to make a decision, and that's our job.
And this is maybe your first big consequential decision as CEO.
I would have told you, I would have never guessed 1 week into the job that would be the first and most important decision I've made.
So you say do it. Now, describe it. What did you do?
So what we decided to do is we were going to talk about race very openly and across the country. So we have 50,000 folks who we all have the privilege to work with at PwC here in the US. And we decided we were going to ask our people on July 21st, so almost just 2 weeks later, which for a large organization is very fast to move that quick, we decided we were going to talk about race and how we all felt. And as you can imagine, the nervousness in the room around what that could go like, what the rules were, what we were going to talk about, how it could go off the rails was immense. But we decided we were going to do it with, frankly, very few rules. We gave some very broad guidelines of what we're trying to accomplish. And we asked our people all across the country to talk about race on July 21st. It happened in Atlanta, in New York, in Philadelphia, in Denver. It happened in groups of 100, in groups of 2. And we decided we were going to do that with the fundamental goal of understanding how one another feel.
What were the rules? I mean, how long is the conversation?
Yeah, so the rules were myself and one of the folks from our diversity office, we shot a 6-minute video, the bulk of which is out on YouTube, and it simply said we were trying to gain an understanding of how we all feel, what it was like to be black, what it was like to be black in our country at that point in time, what it was like to be white and trying to understand and not fully understanding. And so the rules were simple: to respect one another and to be honest and open, and to try to keep it let emotions come out, but to keep it professional at the same boat. And that was it. So some conversations went for hours, some conversations went for 25 minutes.
And I'm going to talk about you in a minute, but for the organization, what came out of that?
What I would tell you is, I will sum it up best. So again, as a CEO and senior partner, you have a lot of people giving you input. And a big part of what we have to do as leaders is listen, and listen to your people. And one of the things that people told us as the day started to unfold was we were learning more about the basics, about the very basic things around how we feel. One person summed it up best. They said, Tim, we've been in business in the US for 160 years. There were more tears shed on July 21st at PwC than there was in our cumulative history, because we really began to understood. And to make it real, we understood that if you were a black professional who worked for us, that you came to work safe feeling the way that you dress, but if you took your jacket off and your shirt off and you were leaving the office to go to a softball game, that you felt less safe. Because one person said to me, I don't have my cape on, and my jacket is my cape. We learned that our black professionals are taught or have to teach their children how to get pulled over, something that in my wildest dreams I never thought about teaching my 6 children. And it was those types of things that we learned that then fostered a fundamental better understanding.
Well, and this is where the story gets very interesting, because you, as I understand it, it wasn't like one day therapy session, we talked about it, now let's move on.
Right.
This has become your driving passion. This has become the definition of your job. Can you explain what that means?
So it's funny, because I've always been passionate about the topic of inclusion. But after the events of last summer, it went to a fundamentally different level. And clearly, we all hear the talking points. There's a business imperative. It's the right thing to do. But going through that experience and meeting subsequent July 21st with so many of our folks, and I want to be clear, not just our minority folks, not just our black folks, but our people in general, and hearing how passionate they felt about it, they pushed me. And what our people said is, great that we did it on July 21st, but what more can we do? And frankly, Tim, what's your responsibility to lead not just inside PwC, but outside PwC? And that led and pushed me to realize we've got to progress inside the walls, but do more outside. So I began to reach out to other CEOs. So we meet with CEOs on a regular basis in our organization, many of your CEOs. And as I started to talk to them, what I realized is many of them had the same challenges, many of them saw the same opportunities, and to be very candid, many were afraid that if they opened up the dialogue, things could go wrong. So we pulled together a group of CEOs, and we began to talk about what is our responsibility as business leaders. And over the last 9 months, we now have a group of over 100 CEOs who are sharing best practices, sharing ideas, and over the next couple of months, we're going to make that public in terms of what we can do to make the world better.
These big companies?
Yep. Thank you.
These are big companies?
The largest employers in the United States. The fundamental goal here is we're blessed at PwC with financial and human capital and a lot of good ideas, and frankly, a lot of mistakes that we make. And the largest organizations around this country are doing really good things. But we have a responsibility to raise the tides for everybody, to help everybody benefit from what we're doing, to share what worked and what didn't work, to share what worked in hiring or promotion or evaluations across the board. And so the commitment that we're making is to share those best practices so everybody benefits from it.
And how difficult has it been to get other CEOs into this effort?
What I would tell you is in life, it's like anything. There's quartiles. So your leading companies jumped right on. They saw the opportunity. They saw the responsibility to lead. Others, it took some convincing. And I would tell you, by the time we got to the late March, April timeframe, it's hockey stick like this. So it has absolutely gone like this. So the momentum, literally a day doesn't go by where we don't have 4 or 5 more companies added to the platform. So early days it was hard. You need to be resilient, but we're making great progress.
So you're in the client services business. Your job is not to change the nature of the workforce in America. Your job is to solve your clients' problems.
Right.
Don't you have clients say to you, hey, Tim, enough of that. My problem's over here. Work on my problem.
Yes, so we do, Alan. And we're in the client service business, but most importantly, we're in the truth business. And in many of our clients, they hire us to solve complicated problems, and they want the truth. And sometimes the truth isn't what they see. And we have this privilege of seeing hundreds and thousands of companies across the US and globally every single week. And at the end of the day, most problems do come down to talent and culture and values. So as we work with our clients, we listen and we try to get to the root cause of the problems. But in many cases, it does come down to culture, values, and talent, and we help advise our clients. So we find ourselves in many shape and ways getting back to workforce and culture and values and helping our clients.
So you don't see this diversity effort as something you're doing over here. You see it as core to your job running PwC in the US.
I think it's a huge mistake if an organization has diversity and talent over on the right side of the box that is an appendage.
Yeah.
It has to be integrated, and your best companies see that, and they see the opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm guessing there are one or two people in the audience who may not work for a CEO who understands this the way you do.
Right.
What is your advice to them? You've now been in the situation of trying to convince more than 100 CEOs to get on board this effort. What are the talking points? What are the arguments that work? How do you make the case that this is really fundamental to the business?
So the first thing I would tell you is just recognize you only go around in life once, just once. Don't miss your opportunity. Don't be afraid, please. Organizations, large organizations, are built to mitigate risk. That's not a bad thing, by the way. That's really important. We have customers who depend on us. We have communities that depend on us. We have tremendous intellectual property and brands. So we're built to mitigate risk. But also understand that organizations need to take risk. And a big part of what you see, it's not lost to me, this audience is, you get it. You're here. You're investing your time. Make sure you're persistent. Don't go away the first time. Most CEOs and senior managers want to do the right thing. They fundamentally want to do the right thing. They want to lead. They want to make their companies better. It takes some convincing. So my first point is don't give up the first time your message isn't heard. The second thing is work to build consensus. Your best leaders in the world are ones who build consensus and find common ground. Work with the business units. Work with other leaders in the functional areas to build consensus so it's not just your voice, it's other voices. And look outside your organization. Work with your professional providers. Work with other community groups that see it. Work with the Urban League. Work with a number of different organizations to partner to get it at the forefront of your agenda. And then lastly, tie it to the business. We live by this saying, if you ignore the trends that are happening, you ultimately will lose your relevance. And the fact of the matter is, workforce, customer base in the United States across the globe are changing. Help make the business imperative that this is critical to your organization's future.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because we spent time with John Chambers. You heard some of it this morning, talking about the incredibly rapid pace and accelerating pace of change, and how that's really changing the nature of everyone's business and has to change the nature of a job like yours dramatically. How does that affect this conversation about diversity?
So look, these trends, so the pace of change primarily tied to technology demographics is fast as it's ever been. I often tell people, with all due respect to former CEOs or former business leaders, this is both the hardest and the most exciting time to lead ever. The world is changing at such a rapid pace. I mentioned I have 6 children. If they would ever listen to me, which is a big if, I would encourage them to go into business or public service if in an immensely way, because we together have the opportunity to change the world. It's embrace the change. It's every single day stretch yourself to understand how technology is going to make your job easier, how technology will make you have the ability to have a bigger impact, but also then form relationships so you can then together solve these important problems. So I think Chambers was right. I mean, no doubt the world is moving faster, but it is the ones who embrace change and adapt that they're going to succeed.
And when you run into somebody who just does not want to embrace change?
So at the end of the day, if it's a CEO, I know Chambers said to call me, and he'll call your CEO. You can call me as well. Like we're interacting with
we'll have to make sure Michael gets your both of your phone numbers out there.
It's easy to find. Just Google it, you'll find it. But at the end of the day, be persistent. But the other thing is, look, at the end of the day, I said you only go around in life once. If your organization isn't getting it, then ask yourselves if you're at the right organization at the end of the day. Like if you don't believe your passion, and your passion isn't being met around inclusiveness, around diversity, around growth, then find a place where you're happy and find a place where you can be your full self.
Do you find what you did last summer has made a difference in the talent that's coming to you?
I would say without a doubt, but I'm also not naive. It's one very, very important state of showing you're willing to take risk. And I'm a big believer in what is called trust-based leadership. Most people in the world wake up wanting to do the right thing. We have the highest educated workforce in the United States, including at PwC, but your organizations. It was a big, important step around trust-based leadership, saying to our people, we trust you. We trust you to have the right conversations. We trust you to make the right decisions. And when you put power in the hands of your people, tremendous things happen. So Alan, what I would tell you is we're on a journey of trust-based leadership, of which what happened in July was just one important step.
Well, and part of that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but part of that trust-based leadership is necessitated by the fact, one, as we already talked about, things are changing so fast. Right. You can't tell people what to do because you won't know soon enough to tell them what to do it. Right. But two, because we're in this odd world of transparency where everybody sort of knows everything over social media, and tensions are heightened and emotions are heightened. Right. And it just makes it, puts a much stronger light on everyone to do the right thing all of the time. And you have to be able to trust them to get them there.
Right. And you have to set the right culture. You have to have a purpose statement and a set of values that embrace that culture and purpose, or else you're lost. Because if you don't have that North Star, an organization is going to survive.
You told me about an interesting leadership training program you went through at PwC. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because that's part of how you got to this point.
That is. So again, blessed to be part of an organization that invests very heavily in human capital, of which not only I have the responsibility of leading, but I've been a major beneficiary of that. So what we did 7 years ago, recognizing the world was changing across these broad megatrends, and just quickly, rapid rates of urbanization. So 1 billion people in the next 25 years move to cities all across our planet, 1 billion people. We studied the Industrial Revolution. What our children and grandchildren will study is the mass migration that's happening on our planet. And it is affecting every business out there: mobility, automotive, transportation, logistics, retail. It's affecting every business. We studied that. We studied what's happening in technology, the social, mobile, analytics, the cloud, and how that's changing it. We studied demographics, income inequality, aging populations, younger populations in this part of the world, and ethnicity. We studied that deeply. And we also studied climate and resource scarcity. We had a 9-month program where the 40 future leaders of our firm globally were immersed in 10 different cities across the planet, where we met with business leaders, we met with innovators, we met with educators.
For the full 9 months?
9 months, over the course of 9 months in 10 cities.
Wow.
That's what we did. And the whole idea was to make sure we understood the world that we were going to be operating and going forward for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it changed me. It changed who I am. It changed the other 39 participants.
The biggest things that you took away from that conversation?
The biggest thing that I took away is, if you ignore those trends, you will lose your relevance, because those trends are what are driving society and business. The second big takeaway that I took is that what is happening around us is not random. It's not random that people all of a sudden care what a corporation pays in taxes in France or in Europe. It's not random that in the United States, we have over 20 states that have a federal minimum wage level that's above the federal limit. And what you see happening around us is organizations, political or private, are taking care of their own, being driven by these trends. And it taught me that we have to listen very differently. So when you look at a Brexit, to us that's not random. That was a sign of what was happening driven by these trends.
Does it make you more optimistic about the future or more worried about the future?
To be clear, I'll just tell you a funny story. So I was at a session like this about a year ago, and I was sitting in the first row because I was going to be speaking later on. And the question got into optimism or pessimism. And it was going down the road of pessimism. And I wanted to jump up, because what I believe is when I talk to our people and I talk to leaders at other companies, most people want a chance to solve the biggest problems. To use a sports analogy, which I know is always dangerous, most people want a chance to get up in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs. Like, that's where we are. Like, that's where we are. And when I look at these problems, I see nothing but opportunity. The human race has shown time and time and time again, we can solve anything. And so when I look at the world, I see nothing but opportunity, because we will embrace these challenges and we will solve them. So I'm an optimist.
And no doubt that's why you are where you are, but you also have to figure out a way to support those people in your organization who are not by nature optimists.
Without a doubt. And it goes to leadership, but it also goes to development.
Yeah.
And so if your organization isn't investing in talent development, you've got to ask what the long-term viability is, because as CEO, you can't solve you really can't solve almost any problem on your own. It's your people and your talent that solve it. So investing in talent development is a huge component at every level.
How much in this job, which you've been doing now for what, 9 months or so, how much of the job is about creating the right culture at PwC, and how much of it is client-facing?
So given that we serve clients, they intersect, but culture is what drives everything. So I would, including a culture of client service, including a culture of integrity, and even that means telling our clients something they don't necessarily want to hear. So I would say 100% of what you do is setting the right tone for the organization.
Yeah. So what would your advice to this group? All these people are in the culture business.
So I have 3 pieces of advice for you all. The first one that
Get your pens out.
Yep.
You're going to want to write these down, I know.
The first one that I would say without a doubt is work hard, because nothing in life that's worth having is going to come easy. You will run into roadblocks. You will stumble. You will run into people who, in your view, get it, in your view, don't get it. But be persistent and work hard. The second thing that I would say is maintain your integrity. You only get it once. And once you lose your integrity, and unfortunately, we'll all be faced with something that comes with that will challenge our integrity. It's not going to be that big thing. It's going to be how you speak up in a meeting where somebody isn't respected well, or a behavior that somebody did that isn't something that you believe is right. Respectfully call them out, but that all goes to integrity. And the last thing is be an optimist at the end of the day, because you're all leaders. You're all leading people in some way, shape, or form, and nobody wants to follow somebody who's kicking the dirt and saying, life stinks, it's not fair, we're doomed, we're not going to make it. Leaders have to be optimistic. Be realistic, but be an optimist, because then people will follow you, and they'll say, you know what, we can get this done. That would be my advice.
What's the toughest thing you've had to do in the last year?
Oh, I would say without a doubt, the toughest thing that I've had to do is, as I continue to try to improve our culture at PwC, it's taking some of the people closest to me and giving them the real coaching that they need, which is hard because they're your friends. They're people you grew up with. But as you continue to shape the culture around inclusivity and even the most subtle things, what people say. So I'll tell you one story that I had. I had an individual on my team who kept referring to women as girls. Innocently, way he was brought up, didn't mean anything by it, but simply pulling him aside, and I'll change the name, say his name is Fred, and just saying, Fred, do you understand that message that you send? And how that makes other people feel? And just calling out the most subtle things go to improving culture. But as was in our organization, we grew up together, but pulling out fellow leaders and people that I grew up with, and helping them do the little things right that improve the culture, that's hard because it's not one, it's day in and day out as you go to shape the culture.
Yeah. You talked about this group of people that went through the training program with you. There were 40 of them? 40. Are those a key part of your team now, or how many of them are still at PwC?
Yeah, so they're all still at PwC. So the criteria for being included in that program is you needed to have at least 10 years of runway. So we have mandatory retirement age 60 in our partnership model. You had to have at least 10 years of runway. So by design, we wanted those people
Younger
around.
people, yeah.
So they're members of my leadership team. They're members of our leadership team over in Germany and China and the UK. And we work together. So while we all bring different perspectives, we all see the foundation of the world similarly in terms of how fast it's moving and what's shaping it. So it's been a huge...
Are you doing the same thing for the next generation?
Absolutely. So a big part of the role is succession planning, making sure you almost have this privilege of not being burdened by the day-to-day.
Yeah.
In terms of results, you've got great people to deliver that, but it is thinking about how does the firm help its clients and its people be relevant 10 years and 20 years.
And what about new hires? How much do you do to get new hires? You hire a lot of people every year. How much? How many people do you hire in a normal?
So just in the U.S. alone, it's 11,000 people a year off campus.
Every year.
Every year.
So how do you take those? That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
How do you take those 11,000 people and get them to become part of the culture?
So it starts from just, I used to think that it was competitive from an athletic perspective on campus. I mean, we are literally touching people from the day they walk in the door on campus. So we are beginning to figure out where the right cultural fit is on campus on day one. And we recruit at about 225 schools thereabouts, including minority schools and underrepresented schools. And we get to know people day one. So it starts, Alan, even before they come in the door. And we're working with people for internships and development on campus. And then when they come in the door, it is the PwC culture. And we start on day one. So there's clearly what I call the technical training. There's the training in terms of how you survive at PwC and what I'll say operations and technology. But then it's culture from day in.
Yeah.
And we developed, 5 years ago, we put in what we call a milestone program. And when someone hits 3 years with us, we invest a full week off-site in their personal development 3 years with us. So they go to a resort in California, and this is about 5,000 people a year that would go through this program, where we invest in their wellness. How do you handle stress? How do you lead people? So it's nothing about, well, you're a healthcare person, here's the technical training. You're an audit person. That's not the training. It's a full week in personal and professional development.
Wow.
That's at 3 years. At 6 years.
Where's the resort?
The resort is in Southern California. Yeah.
It's a nice place to spend.
Very nice play, and the idea is you're away from it all.
Yeah. So, okay, so I have to ask you, it's not as important as what we've been talking about, but I have to ask you about the Oscars.
Yes.
Yeah, what went down there?
Yeah, so what went down, but it is a great lesson. So in full disclosure, I was sitting in the audience. I thought it was a day off. And I knew we weren't supposed to be on stage. And so the second I saw my partners on stage, I knew something went wrong. But it was a very important leadership lesson. And I learned growing up in our firm that bad news does not age well. And when you make a mistake, you own up to it.
Yeah.
I live by that. I tell my children that every day. And I saw right away that we had made a mistake. And we owned up to it right away. So within 2 hours of that happening, we had a press statement out that I worked on with our team, having been there, and we came out and said we own the issue. We made a mistake. And I'm not proud that we made the mistake. I'm very proud that we owned up to it and hit it head on.
Did you learn anything from that experience?
I did. Well, I learned my fundamental belief of bad news doesn't age well when you make a mistake, own up to it. So another funny story. So I was out in California. I was traveling that week, and I got home on Thursday night. We were going to the bus stop with the kids on Friday morning. And my daughter said, "Dad, you always tell us to own up to a mistake. I'm glad you followed the advice that you give us." And I think that's the right thing to do. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Tim, very inspiring. Thank you. I want to come work at PwC.
Great. You're welcome. We would love to have you. Alan, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.